Welcome to The Eyes of Indigo with your infinitely curious hosts, Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Our show is broadcast live at 9:30 p.m. Wednesdays. Socio-spiritual topics are laced with humor as we discuss weird stuff in a rational way. Learn more about us in our first episode, The Prequel. Shows are recorded and available on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, iTunes, and other aggregators. A keyword searchable index is at iriscarter.com/EOI directory. Share ideas and comments in the program chat or by email. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share our show. Let us know you're here by typing your hello in the comments because we are thrilled to welcome you as we begin another adventure right now.
And hello. And yes, so Margot, I'll let you start things off while I double check the status of our podcast here, make sure I didn't hit any wrong buttons.
Absolutely. Hi, this is Eyes of Indigo. My name is Margot. On the other end of the screen is Iris. We are co-hosts. And in the middle is our special guest tonight, Tony Rodrigues. Welcome to the show. Yay!
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're excited for this. And welcome to all of our viewers, our regular viewers. Hi, welcome to see you again. And
Margot, I'm going to stop you and restart because I think I hit the button wrong. Something's not working.
The intro was all screwed up.
Oh, wait a minute. No, we got a viewer. We've got a viewer. Go ahead.
If you are viewing, please type hello in the comments or in the chat so we can know you're out there.
Yeah, okay.
Give us a running start.
Live. We are live. It's okay. Good. Scared me to death. I just knew I had screwed up. I apologize. All right.
No worries. No worries. So tonight we have a special guest, which is Tony Rodrigues. And yes. And Iris, you wanted to do an introduction of sorts?
Yeah, just a brief introduction. We to show this, we advertised it. He is going to discuss with us his personal experiences and perspectives on ETs, UFOs, exopolitics, and if you don't know what that means, we'll tell you, and the not-so-secret space program. Since more and more people are learning about it, that was my attitude in this, and it's going to be a rabbit hole. We're definitely doing something a little bit different than we've done in the past, but we think our
viewers not that far different.
And yeah, it's not far different. It's just going to be a little more direct discussion about some of the things that we've alluded to before, and lots of strange things. So, and Tony, what can you add to that description about yourself?
Thanks. Firstly, thanks for having me. The subject matter of a functioning secret space program, one that is built out and is actually in the solar system working in the name of governments and corporations in the world, has proliferated. We've had plenty of great whistleblowers that came forward, and then we've had a lot of drama that and a lot of bad things happen for people that were giving this information. So the subject matter itself has been very badly beaten up over the last few years. It seems like there was no effort to stop the information originally, and now there's a great effort to silence the information. And it's very important because there's a great deal of evidence behind not only my testimony, but many other people like me. And with that huge body of evidence, it also explains a lot of things that don't make sense that are happening in our day-to-day lives in real time. So it's a very important subject. It's very important to understand that governments and corporations are working alongside extraterrestrials with radically advanced technologies, and that there is already a huge human presence from Earth in our solar system and in nearby stars.
Wow.
How's that? How'd I do?
That was good. And humans have been out there for, what, thousands of years?
Well, probably the whole time. That's probably where we came from, but that's a different subject matter.
That's a
I
whole
know
nother
that
subject. Absolutely. That's
the
true. That's true. We're talking about origin stories now. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
the
a good point.
facets of the space programs that I was involved with have been out there probably upwards of 100 years. So we're talking World War II era, and then right after that they began settling. When I was up there in colonies on Ceres and on Mars, they were already aged. So the buildings were old. There was rust. They were aged buildings, so they were up there a very long time. I remember on Ceres Colony about 250,000 people living there full time. So there's actually a very advanced and established colonies in our solar system, and people that are spacefaring, not only just in our solar system, but to many stars and in fact other galaxies. Like traveling great distances has already been settled and is sorted out. So we're seeing a lot of changes in the world right now, and I believe they're getting ready to tell us, because they're going to have to tell us the truth sooner, very soon.
You're familiar with you're probably familiar with the work of Dr. Stephen Greer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's big on disclosure, obviously. Next week, he's doing a press conference with the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. It'll be televised on YouTube, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, yet another person that's, that like you has tremendous credentials behind him for years, talking about, guys, we've been knowing this, doing this for decades and longer. Let me tell you. And yeah, it's getting more and more widespread. Pilots' footage and military recordings that are no longer scrubbed are
Right.
making mainstream media left and right. So,
I think that a lot of people miss the point when they see the UAP phenomenon that's been admitted. They go, yeah, well, we know this. It could be some other country. It could be some exotic technology. But the point that people miss is that the physics behind of what they've released and confirmed exist open the door to deep space flight. So the physics in these UAPs, if this was China, this means that China can go to Saturn and back pretty quick. It means that China can go to Mars and we could move there very quickly. So the UAP phenomenon is a much bigger canary in the coal mine than anybody wants to admit. The mainstream doesn't want to admit. I'm a fan of the great effort that Stephen Greer has done. I differ with him in the opinion that he thinks that all species that are starfaring, spacefaring species are benevolent, and that they've reached an area where they would never harm anybody. In my experience, nature extends beyond the sky, and it's the same kind of political. They're not good or evil, right? They're not good or evil. They have their own agenda to serve their own purposes according to their perspective, the same way that countries on Earth behave. The United States is not good or evil, but we have our own perspective, and we do things that some may deem as bad, and we do things that some may deem as great, depending on perspective. And the ETs are the same exact relationship. So I differ with Dr. Greer's theory greatly in that regard, but everything else, I'm very happy for him to be championing this. Somebody has to put the effort
it's a step in the right
and
direction.
force a disclosure by the government. Otherwise, they'll keep us in the dark for as long as they can. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy because there's very solid medical technology. There is consciousness technology. There's technologies that are going to lead to people cleaning up spiritually. I say that I've said this for years, is that a lot of people don't have a role model. A lot of people, we don't aspire to be anything other than rich or a little bit more. Like we're consuming. We're programmed to consume and pay taxes. And if we saw how some of the more advanced species live, we would aspire to be better people. And so disclosure will come with some of that as well. And there's a lot that we can learn from that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think there's a lot of effort that if we saw how other species lived and tried to emulate that, then our own slave masters essentially on this earth would lose a lot, because they're getting help for minimum wage, work being done, and that sort of thing. And so we would just if people all of a sudden stood up and go, we don't have to live like this anymore, then corporations would be up shit creek. So
yeah, they start losing their cash cows. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of mentality that people could do in our system that we live in right now. A lot of people don't believe that they can make their situation better. They just believe that they're living the life that they've been dealt, and that's that. And there's a collective, there's a collective people with their head in their sand times millions. And people could just learn that reality isn't what the television told us it was.
It's not what it's handed you, what you make it.
You can change your life to be much better. You are in control. And we don't need ETs for that. And that's a step in that direction. But there's so much more. And there's other forms of spirituality. We were talking a little bit off camera, and we were saying how the recent years have showed, the lies, the massive deception behind many, many facets of the media and the government.
Yes.
Working hand in hand, where they acted like they never did before. And if you look back through history, you have to question, where is the line where we've been lied to? Like, where was it before the media? Was it the politics before that? Was it the religion lying to us? Before that, there were, monarchies lying to us. So there's a lot of things that need to be sorted out from our own history. We see that, we have to take control of our own lives, and we can't just hand it over to the people in charge, because they're going to tell us what's most convenient for them. And we've learned it recently, and it's being hammered down to us. So when you look back in all of history, you have to unpack and accept. You have to be open to the idea that everything might have been a lie.
Well, if you think about it, as individuals, we often have our own truths that when we share them with other people, we tend to twist them just a little bit to make it in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so if we can do that as just a small little individual that's just a regular person, think about somebody who has fame and power or control and how they're going to twist. So, so it's like you can always see that there might be a little bit of truth in something, that anything that comes out of from a politician's mouth, or the monarchy or religion or whatever, but then they're going to twist the hell out of it to benefit themselves.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just going from an individual to some bigwig, you can kind of see how that could easily happen. And I'm just taking the logical route, so that then when you think on the grander scheme and people go, oh, those are conspiracy theories. Well, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just pure fact.
Logic.
Logic.
Yeah. We've been taught to believe everything that they tell us. And so the information of a secret space program, like when you look into my account, there were some very bad things that happened, very inhumane things alongside, in step with ET civilizations, with ET groups that, they allowed a lot of inhumane things to happen that I witnessed and experienced. And so my testimony is something along those lines. And that's another reality, greater reality, that we have to be accepting of, that once we get into space publicly and we make contact with extraterrestrials publicly in a disclosure event, we're going to find that many of them are good for us, that they're going to be good neighbors. We're also going to find that many of them are not. And again, it goes back to perspective and this, we are a certain life form, and there are other life forms that just they're natural cat and dog kind of relationship. So this is a reality, and we have been secretly victimized by some of these groups for a very long time, and that's why the secrecy perpetuates. So, go ahead.
I hear you describing basically the holographic universe. We see that reflected in human culture. Some of your neighbors are great and some are not, but it depends on your perspective about whether or not those ungreat neighbors are actually bad people or not. And then, service to self, service to others. That's another definition that it seems to have more clarity rather than necessarily good or necessarily bad. But you're describing a holographic universe. What we experience here happens on a macro scale, this turns on a galactic scale as well. It's all about perspective.
Absolutely.
And what your reference is, what your mental psychological filters are, what your experience is, how much you're aware, what you believe in and what you don't. You believe in time, you believe in service to others, or don't. And all those filters kick in. Something you were touching on just a few minutes ago that I wanted to bring around. lots of times in conversations, obviously not on air, but in private, when people are asking me about the, let's call them the inhumane activities that sometimes happen. And the biggest one for communication lately is what they do to children. All right. So when people get in a safe conversation with me and they're willing to hear, and I tell them, guys, past this point, it gets really macabre and it's going to trigger you. So if you want me to gloss over this, I will. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But we're talking about a one-on-one, a one-on-two conversation. And they hear about, again, I'm going to gloss over for the sake of the fact that we're on YouTube and so on. Don't want to get pinged. But when they hear about the enslavement, commonly called human trafficking here on Earth, these compassionate people that are unaware but are curious out of compassion because they want to help, their question always comes up, how could they do that to, and it's interesting, they say us. I find that an interesting choice of pronouns, considering they were oblivious an hour before, Right. It's really cool that empaths kick in, right? So how could an entity be so cruel to another intelligent entity? And I'm like, well, holographic universe, guys, there's a couple of examples that'll make this real clear. First of all, do you think that we're very, very, very compassionate and kind to chickens and cows and and lamb and they're like, oh, yeah, because a lot of people are carnivores or omnivores.
I was just going to say that veal is on the menu at the restaurant within a mile from me. And
always,
it's the same difference.
It's everywhere. Yeah, it's like, and so they're like, well, but I understand spiritually, blah blah blah, animals in service, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, that's part of your belief system. That's cool too. But they still don't understand humans. They said, and animals are not humans. I'm saying, how can a humanoid enslave another humanoid like that? And I said, you gotta understand, they don't see us as fellow humanoids.
They don't see us as their equal, and in fact, we are not. So biologically, we have, they had, when I was on Sirius Colony, they had intelligent life in categories, and it was based on the amount of data you could share in a conversation. So we have 150,000 to 250,000 words that we use. There were humanoids that used 500,000 or 1 million words, and they were another level of intelligence above. There were humanoids above that could do 100,000 words in a very short time telepathically. So they trade more data. So we can't even understand them. If we're in the room and there are humanoids that can trade so much data quickly, mentally, on a telepathic level, that we are like an animal to them. So that's it. The person that says that, what they're saying is, how could they treat that to us, is assuming that they're at the top of the food chain, and we are not.
Yes.
We are not at the top of the food chain. We are in the middle of we're in the beginning of the humanoid food chain. The other thing is that a lot of these beings that can see us, victimize us, they live for 500 or 1,000 years. We live for 60 to 80 years, 100 years.
They know all the tricks.
Well, I'm saying, so their respect for our life, they're like, you're going to die anyway. You're a short-lived being annie.
It's like a housefly.
That's exactly right. We don't think anything at all about lower life form. We don't bat an eye. Like you said, the chickens and the other things, we don't bat an eye at their service to us as a food supply. And a lot of these ETs, not only that, but when they're on the higher level, they don't need us as physical food supply, as proteins. They're taking our energy. Our mental energy is a commodity, and our consciousness.
Yeah, mental, emotional, loosh, and
a lot of technology
and consciousness. Yeah,
a lot of technologies are ran off of consciousness, and we are a great source of that. It's better to take a consciousness from a humanoid, an 80-year human, than a cow, so they're not going to bother to take it off themselves. So you can roll the clock forward on all of the discriminations that mankind have, racially, species-wise, financially, geographically. We have all these kinds of prejudice that are built into our psyche. A lot of the ETs are the same way, and we have to defend ourselves against that. That's just the reality of it. So there are ETs that understand that, but there are some that don't, because they see us as a human, and they are a different makeup genetically, and they have a different existence and a different mentality. So they see us as something that should be exploited. So that's the reality up there.
They think that's what we.
Is it then a given that if we're low man on the totem pole, that all extraterrestrials are smarter than we are?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So you know what? So this is something, and I hate to take it back to, I've had this conversation with people over drinks, and if somebody, there's a saying that if you let somebody kick you once, they'll kick you once. And if you let somebody kick you 10 times, they're going to kick you 10 times. It's where you dictate. And so we are at a point, are we going to take that? Are we going to allow that to happen? So when these corporations and governments got into space originally at the turn with a mentality of a World War II mentality, you got to look at what society was really built of post World War One.
Right.
There were a lot of things that were a day at the office for them that is absolutely unthinkable now. Genocide being one of them, torture, all these things. But the value of life in the early 1900s is much different than the programming that gave us the value of life now. We didn't evolve. We were programmed. We have been programmed to value life the way that we do now. We did not evolve that way. It was programming. So they had a different programming back then, and then they got into space. And so the very first thing, they had no technology to trade, but they did have people. They did have manpower, and they traded us. And so people went in to become slaves, and they traded and acquired technology. And frankly, I think that we weren't ready for a lot of the technologies that they got. The life extension technology, the 20-year tour, the career return technology. So there were a lot of things that we weren't ready for that they acquired. And here we are 100 years later while they're sorting it out. And we have a way to go. So they are using the programming to pit us against ourselves. There's definitely a secret war going on globally right now between either corporations or governments or both, all of the above. There are things going on in the world that make no sense. There are things being destroyed. The United States is under siege on many, many fronts. And everybody knows it if you have access to the data, and they've obscured our access to the data. So my point is, these things are going on, and these are the people that must disclose to us. These are the people that have access to space, and this is their mentality. So you have to look at what's going on. You got to look at the results of the efforts of the elite to understand why the elite is doing what they're doing. And so they are in a panic. They have been for some time now, and because they must disclose, they're going to have to disclose to us, or we're going to figure it out on our own very shortly.
Can you explain? Can you repeat what you said before the interview about how you feel the general public, the mechanics, the shade tree mechanics building telescopes, how they're eventually, and why versus digital observatories, why that would make a difference for a homemade telescope versus a public telescope that is altered?
Absolutely. I did a lot of amateur astronomy, and the professional telescopes and the professional astronomers have electronic cameras that are all basically sanctioned by the United States Air Force. Then they have software in them that deletes any classified craft in the field of the telescope or in the picture that it takes in real time. So an operator of a 4-meter telescope looking at the computer screen and a UFO flew across it, they would never see it. The computer would delete it in real time. Where we're at now technologically is people have access to tools. We have 3D printers and routers, and guys that are running shops in their garage, they used to work on the Chevy, now have the ability to make some pretty advanced things. And so somebody could make a very small, a good size, not very small, but a good sized off-axis paraboloid telescope that would eliminate any kind of diffraction, and they could put a polarized spectrometer to it and absolutely figure out, somebody could do this on their own and figure out the chemical makeup of exoplanets. As they pass in front of the star, they can see the atmosphere and see proof of life. So we're going to get to the point where we can prove life, and the guys can just roll this out of their garage and do this. And so they have to tell us. They either have to get us back out of this level of technology, or they have to tell us. That's just where they're at right now. And so they're scrambling to concoct the best, most logical lie to give us, and the circumstance that we get it. I really hope that there's
The
not going
best
to be.
BS.
Yeah, right. They're making for the most logical thing, and you got to look at this. So, when you read my book, a lot of people read my book and are very devastated to read what I went through as a boy in these black programs. I was taken as a boy into the black programs.
You were enslaved.
I was a slave. That's right.
You were brutally enslaved.
But
Yeah.
when
And you were 10 years old.
I was
too.
10
This
years
started-
old. But when you look at what they were doing and what they are based on logic. So these are people that are power game. I call it power gaming. People power game things. They get they never miss any opportunity to increase their own position. That's power gaming. No matter what it is, they collect every coin.
There are humans like that everywhere.
There are a lot of humans like that. They're driven by ambition.
We call them grifters.
They get addicted to it. It's an addiction.
Yes.
And these are the people that are running these programs. And so because I looked into I really had to wrestle with my conscience when I got my memories back. I had to really wrestle and say, why would they do this to me? Why would they do this to us? Right? So why would they do this to us?
Very,
and the more I think about
question.
it, because it makes sense. It's their power gaming. They're in a race. You don't have excess things in a race. You do everything you can, and it's even if you have to step on toes of children to do it. And so it makes sense in that regard, in a purely logical way. And so, I'm not giving them a pass, and I don't want to say I have some kind of Stockholm syndrome. Obviously, it's barbaric, and it's the tortoise and the hare. When you're in a race like that, somebody with morals, somebody that does it
will stop racing,
brings the kids around. It's the tortoise and the hare. At the end of the trail, in the long run, the person with the morals is going to be better off. So these people are ultimately self-defeating. These programs, and they know this. So they've done it long enough where they know.
So they're burning. So that motivates them to do it even more during their high time.
They have to tell bigger lies to cover the lies they've told. Exactly. And there's a time when they're not going to be able to keep up the energy. They know this. This is what's going on. And but that's what these programs are, and that's what's going on in the world right now. So there's a logical way. These people are very smart. The people that are running these things are very, very smart. They're very they would have you believe the government is incompetent, and that's a deception.
Do you think you call them humans? Do you really think they're humans?
I think they're in league with non-humans. I think that they're humans that have made trade deals and have acquired access to advance. So just because they get access to technology doesn't mean they own it. So they make deals with ETs, and they can use the technology and for their own benefit, but they don't own it. So they have to keep the ET group appeased. And some of the power situation on Ceres Colony was like that. They had an ongoing lease for the power units that powered the colony. They had 1 or 2 units that generated enough power for the whole colony for 250,000 people. So making free energy was not a problem. It's making free energy with a super high output, which was a coveted technology. So you couldn't just do that on your own. They would have to lease these generators from ETs. And in order to do that, they had to sometimes trade things and do unscrupulous things. So to get ahead, that's where they're at. We're coming right out of, it might as well be the Stone Ages into the space ages. And these people, the ETs that we're trading with, have been there for thousands, millions of years. And so there's a huge disadvantage, and the morals get in the way at this point. I'd like to say from their perspective, exactly, from a military perspective. When a military is concerned with survival, the health and welfare of the nearby village is irrelevant. The Army's survival is precedent. And that's what these programs, this is the mentality of these programs that have taken place. And so these are the guys that are covering up everything. The other thing is that I catch a lot of hell. I catch a lot of hell for saying this. But it's true. I mean,
it's okay.
Not everybody's ready. A lot of people are not ready. Like, I can get into the spiritual aspect of things about what people that incarnate. You live a life and then you learn your lesson from it. At the end of the life, you go, man, I wish I'd done this. And then you incarnate again, and that's your lesson. And so people advance. Not everybody's on the same page. There are people that behave like animals, and they're a great deal. If anybody that looks through Twitter sees horrible things. Right, you see horrible behavior in the inner cities. Like, people are victimizing each other. If I were an ET, I wouldn't be excited about visiting New York. So there are things like that we have to take into consideration, that not everybody is ready to behave, and so there is and because we've been weaponized against each other, the programming, the elites have not programmed us. The school systems, The educational system has not done its job. It's completely failed in America.
Mm.
America's been weakened, while aspects of Asia and Europe have been strengthened in that
Yeah,
regard.
it serves them, not the population.
So
Yeah.
for us to disclose and invite ETs down here, we're not ready for that on a certain extent. And I think people would shift gears very quickly after post-disclosure if they really tried to do that. But I don't think that the elites at the top have sorted out who's going to be in charge of what. Like I don't think they've sorted it out. Some of them are absolutely seem to be psychopathic. But a post-disclosure world is going to have to be something that is far more stable than the world we're in.
Well, something you mentioned a minute ago that kind of caught me was you said the government is not incompetent.
That's right.
So is it, which granted, I mean, I know the government, there's a lot of people in it and the network works just fine as far as that goes. But are they deliberately trying to portray like an incompetent leadership to throw us off?
Absolutely. So they want an incompetent leader. So what is your faith in the government today when you look at all the things they're doing, all the horrible things literally that they're doing to us? They're completely failing us on all, currently today in the United States. And I'm not trying to get anybody's vote here. I'm not trying to influence your vote, really. But I'm saying currently, when you look at our financial system,
facts. Yeah,
the police, the state of the laws, the homeless problem, the immigration problem, the food chain is being the inflation, all of it across the board, it's dire. Our leaders have driven the bus over the cliff. It's on purpose because we were in great shape a short time ago. So it's on purpose. It's only with purpose, and it's across the globe. It's through South America, Peru, Brazil, Australia. I'm trying to think, Canada. These are all governments that seem to be on the same page, doing the same cookbook of things and driving their individual economies and policies over the cliff. So there is a concerted effort. There is a conspiracy of the elites on one end or at least it seems to be that way, that there's a concerted effort to get to a certain end. There's a means to justify, there's an end that they want to justify the means of what they're doing. So they're not telling us what they're doing, but they do have something in mind because they're not this incompetent. They're all on the same page. Believe me, when the government wants to get rid of something, they get rid of it.
They know how.
And so when they want to move heaven and earth moves. So the government is very competent. The powers that be at the top of the elite level, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when they want something done, it happens, and it happens very well. So
do you think? I mean, because I know a lot of the efforts that have been made are, divide us as much as they can, because if we're not united, then we're easier to overcome. Do you think it is to further? It's just another divisionary tool, or?
I can only theorize. You know what I mean? Like we're talking theory right now, but like I said, there are people. So let's say that there's a disclosure of it right now.
Okay.
That they go, okay. So by the way, we have bases on the moon. There's 1 million people on the moon. There's 10 million people on Mars. There's people on Ceres. There's an intergalactic treated base, several bases around Jupiter. And these guys are the Federation of Worlds, and these guys are the Orion Group, and there are several other groups. We all do business. And they're in our solar system. And by the way, our solar system is a main hub for traffic in the galaxy. They admit this, and they come down. The first rally cry from the American public is going to say, where's our stuff? Where's our free stuff you're going to give us? Where's my spaceship? I need to get up there. Why? Me. So we're not we've been programmed to be a powder keg so that they could burn it all down on purpose. Some people with a few flips of the switch, they can they make us burn our own cities down. So this is on purpose. They've been programming us for 50, 100 years.
Well, we've already seen that with the riots that we've
That's
had.
exactly right. They can flip a switch. They can flip a switch and do that.
To what end? Can you verbalize your opinion about what they gain by destroying their own cultures?
Well, it's a control mechanism. Someone who controls the thing. Someone who can destroy a thing controls the thing. It's from Dune. I'm quoting Dune, the movie.
Yeah.
So,
cool. Yeah.
But it's true though. But the first things first. If you're a when a special forces goes into an enemy place, they
Yeah.
carry enough explosives for the mission and to destroy the craft. So when we crashed our helicopter in Bin Laden's compound, we destroyed it. We did not leave it behind. We destroyed it. And so
Right.
they have the ability to destroy us. That's war. It's first thing of warfare is don't
Okay.
leave anything for the enemy. And so they have the ability. We have been programmed and weaponized so that we don't figure out that the deal we're getting. They're not, on and I can keep these quotes up all night. They're not going to teach you enough to overthrow them. They're not find out who rules
Common
you by not
sense,
being
they're
able to criticize them. So there are international organizations that are in control of the monetary system and on and on. And they all have fail safes against each other that if you guys go against our policy, we can flip this switch. And we did do that. And we saw it play out, and we saw American cities burn and dozens of people died. And so there were billions of dollars of damage because our government was doing something for the United States and not the global agenda. And then it quickly was supplanted. So I mean, I don't want to get, again, we're on YouTube and we get in trouble. And I'm not out for votes here. I'm not trying to sway people. I'm just saying, when you look at the historical facts that we all witnessed, you don't need to look it up online. We witnessed this. And so, what I'm saying is, so if there's a disclosure event tomorrow, they can't undo that. We've already
Right.
been weaponized. We've already been programmed. We can be used by the enemy. And if we go, and the same people that are ill behaved here have access to an ET base or the backside of the moon, or Mars or Ceres, then they're a liability. They're not a guest. And so, rather than the programming of seeing us change, we are seeing people change. We are seeing, and I'm not
Yeah.
pro what they're doing with the kids, with the pronouns and things, but I think this is a step to acceptance of other beings. We are gonna come across. I've said this from day one in my testimony. Post disclosure, we are going to come across billions of people that live up there, that live a lifestyle that we detest. And we're going to have to be acceptant of that. So we are going to see beings that get along in ways that we absolutely can't believe. We're shocked and we can't stand. And they're going to think the same of us. We are going to see beings
goes
that are
both
our
ways.
equal that we think are ugly. And they're going to think that we're ugly, and we're going to have to accept this. And so a lot of society, we're seeing the birth pains of this. We're seeing the programming rammed down our throat. Like, rather than program us over a long period of time where it was slight, we didn't know it.
Like
Instead
they
of
did
going
for hundreds
from the
of years,
60s
right?
to the 80s, they went from the 60s to the 80s. They took forever. Now we're seeing it in a few years. In a few years, we're seeing radical changes in society because they're in a hurry, because they have to, because we are technologically advanced enough to discover them.
To discover it on our own.
Man, I
So-
feel like I just recited a book.
Professorial dissertation there. You did a good job. So I want to spin us back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago in passing that our audience is usually particularly interested in, and you were talking about the spirituality changes, the human evolution of consciousness, and so on. And we also, this may be the also may be integrated with this, but for our viewing audience, a little bit more storytelling about your origin story. How do you know all this stuff? How has this wonderful information come onto your radar? I know this backstory, and so does Iris. And by the way, can we show your book?
Sure.
Your
I have a couple here, so I'm always going to promo my book. It makes it a lot easier. So this is my first book, Series Colony Cavalier. It was a bestseller in autobiographies when it came out. I think I did 6 weeks at #1. I was very proud of that. Very unexpected. It's the story. It's not a PG. It's not a Star Trek episode. It's very disturbing. It's the story of what I went through in 2015. I got an MRI scan and coincidentally came across Randy Kramer's account about the 20-year tour, about people being taken into these programs, used for 20 years in several programs, and then put back the same day that they were taken. So how the mechanism of technology could be, is still up for grabs, how they do that. But I was taken and lived for 20 years and then put right back the next night. That happened, and as I got the memories all came to me in a chunk over a few weeks. I got big chunks of the memories, and I started looking up places. Fortunately for me, most people that are taken in these programs are taken off-world, straight to Mars or the moon, and they do service in these military programs that are in the space program. I was privately owned. I was kind of shut through the side door, and I lived on places on Earth for the first 6 years of my 20 years, 6 or 7 years. And when I got these memories back, I went, wait a minute. I remembered living in Peru. I remembered living in Seattle, and not just a few memories. I mean, I remembered years of details of memories and the people there. And so the first thing I did was like look them up. And when I saw the places, so if you understand what this could feel like, imagine if you woke up tomorrow and you remembered living for 2 years in Peru, somewhere that can prove you've never been. And then you look on Google and go, oh, there it is. And you know it's exactly like there was a pond you went fishing at. There was an airport you'd walk to. The same distance, the house, the cafeteria where you got food, the place you stayed, the place you met your friends, played soccer. All these things that you had, all these memories just fall in one day and go, what is this? And then go and look on Google somewhere you've never looked, never been, and you can prove it, and then see it's all exactly how you remember it right there. That is the experience that I have. And at that point, I thought, I need to contact somebody. I can't take this to the grave. I did that, and I looked, and I found the house in Seattle. I actually went to Seattle in 2016 and knew my way around. So imagine that. Like I was driving around, and I knew the route. I knew my way where I was and somewhere I've never been. And I went through that experience. And then as I began to research the time and space, there are other whistleblowers that corroborated many things. NASA even corroborated. I said that it was a geyser on the Ceres colony, on the Ceres planetoid, the dwarf planet in between Mars and the asteroid belt. There's a place called the Okator crater, Okator, or whatever, however you want to pronounce it. And there were white spots. There's the slide. Okay. There were white spots. You can see it right under where it says Alliance is. Right under the is, you can see the white spots.
The salt flats. Yeah.
So right there. So in 2016, when the Dawn probe was about this far out taking these pictures, I was asked by Dr. Sala and other researchers I was working with, what are those white spots? And I said, that's a geyser. And the geyser has salty water, like ocean water, and it sprays it up in the air, and then the water evaporates and the salt snows back down. That's salt. And so the Dawn probe made a first spectral analysis at high altitude, and it said it's probably sulfur and a few other minerals, not salt. But that was the first theory that NASA gave. And Dr. Sala wrote me an email. He said, "Do you want to retract your statement?" And I said, "Absolutely not. That is salt." This is in 2006, end of 16, I believe, early 17. I said, "Absolutely not. That is salt. Believe me, there's a little bit of magnesium and there's salt. It's just salt." And I remember vividly flying over it in close proximity in a ship, looking and watching the geyser. We actually took time from our posts. I worked on a cargo ship at the time for the Ceres Colony Corporation, and it was something you never forget. So in August of 2020, NASA had concluded, because the Dawn probe went to a lower orbit and it did a better high-quality spectral analysis, and concluded that it was briny salt. And so I was confirmed with that. So the same way that things on Earth lined up that were proved, the same way that Peru, the places I called out that are there, the same way that are people and historical events in Peru that I've called out that have researched and been able, the same way that people and places and classifications of the districts in Inyo, Kern, California, and in Seattle, the places, all these things keep lining up. So that's why I'm still talking about it. Like I wouldn't have the guts to come on here and tell this story if I didn't have something to back it up a little bit. I understand that anybody listening to this should be skeptical, and that's fine. It'd be weird if you were not. But these things can't be explained away. How did I know that was salt? 4 years ahead of time. Before NASA did. Before anybody did. I called it out and was validated. And then the Peru thing, and I'm still shaking out information about Peru and Seattle. So these are things that just can't be explained away. So anyhow, that's all. The rest of the linear account of what I remember is in this book, Ceres Colony Cavalier. So there was a chapter in this book. There was a time in this book. Iris, you haven't got there yet, but you will.
Okay.
And it says, but that's another story. There was another 10 years, and that's what this one is. And this is a collection of stories, and this is the sequel. It's called Project Star Maker, and it was just released a few weeks ago. And I think it's #1 in reincarnation right now. It's #1, but it's a shorter book. It's not an equal; it's a sequel, but it's a collection of stories that are around the spiritual aspects of it, of my memories of this. Other things that turned out that are not provable, things that are not provable, but a lot of other people relate to. I hate the word resonate, but they resonate with. This is about the spirituality
It's about frequency. Yeah, it's about frequency when humans connect. I
did things. The early program that I was in as a kid, they would put me on an airplane in Peru running cocaine paste from Boca, Colorado, Peru to Santa Marta, Colombia. And they would drug me with an intravenous drug and bring me near to death. And during that state, I was a security warning system. I would tell them if the weather was bad or if there were police, whatever. They could ask me questions, and other entities spoke through me, different accents. There were times when I spoke Spanish. Other entities spoke through me and gave reliable information. So that was the program that I was in originally, and it traces back to CIA-funded things from Project Grill Flame and Project Center Lane. I found a lot of paperwork about this. But during that time, when I was under, it was like I was out of body, and I had access to past lives and other things that happened.
Yeah.
And that may be the whole reason I got my memories back, is because of that state of mind that I was in repeatedly. And that's what Project Star Maker is about. So that story is far more spiritually oriented, and it's it's woo compared to the series Colony Cavalier is like the A to Z account of what happened. Waking, going to school one day, being taken, living for 20 years in these black programs, and then being put back and then going to school the next day. Like, that's series Colony Cavalier. Project Star Maker is the things that kind of sifted through that were unbelievable, that I in an interview like this, people don't ask me the spiritual questions, so it just never came up. And the first book did so well that everybody was like, please write another book. There was a popular demand. And we worked with it. And Jackie Kenner added her own. First time that she wrote some things, and she added, I think, 4 or 5 chapters of her own experiences that dovetailed into the things that I was saying that I was unaware of. That, like she gave her supporting
corroboration.
Yes, corroboration to my account of what. And we had talked for years. We did a show, Talks with Tony. I do a show on Patreon called Talks with Tony. And I have a remote viewing class that I do, which is based on the information that I discovered. We have a few other classes that I do, and the show is there. And I do consultations, and there's a memory course. So I've been quite busy since I've gone public, from people contacting me and asking for help because they feel they've been through similar things. Well over 2,500 people have contacted me and saying that they feel they've been through the same or similar experience as what I describe. So this is not
2,500 have contacted you
easily. Yes, yes. I get
times 7 is how many people are actually out there, and so to speak, there's another 7 people that have not gotten to where they can reach out to someone.
Every time I do an interview, more people contact me, and they go to the website, and I added the consult fee because I couldn't keep up with everybody. People were getting mad at me for not emailing back. There was just no way for me. I have a 9 to 5, like I have a regular life.
You have a life.
And this isn't what I do. This is kind of what I do professionally now. Most of the time, this is taken over. My 9 to 5 is now part-time. There's the website, is TonyRodrigues.com, that kind of links to the books and other interviews. And like we talked earlier, I'm working on a website, a web page that will have all of the evidence, my supporting evidence behind my account, that it will get linked onto TonyRodrigues.com when it's done. We'll have some videos on there. I had my mom. I went to my mom and got her on camera. She remembered some things that were, from when I was young, and so she'll be on there. Brad Olson went to Inhumane, the place in California, and he FaceTimed me, and that was a good piece of evidence. So that'll be on there, and just all the supporting evidence that I can cobble together, so that people that are skeptical can at least go there. And I invite everybody to please research it. I will cooperate with anybody researching, and about it, because I think this is a very important subject matter. This happens. I'm not the only one. Our governments are doing this, and the political ramifications of what's going on explains the strangeness of what's going on in the world. So our governments are trying to appease,
when you let it come together,
a more advanced government that's in space. That's exactly right. So I feel like I did it again. I feel woo.
We're intrigued. We're very intrigued.
We told everybody you were a great speaker, and if anybody in the audience has a question, we've got a few more minutes. You can throw a question out, but I know we can always tell when our audience gets really quiet. That's sort of a good thing because they're like so into it.
All ears. Yeah. I'm talking fast.
They take off their tinfoil hats and really listen.
Yeah.
They do awesome that way. So my question is a little bit more, actually, it's based on, my next question is based on your spiritual commentary. And you alluded to your own spiritual evolution is basically in this book. And my question is, okay, we know spiritual evolution and spiritual journeys are ongoing. They never stop. You never finish. If you're lucky, you never finish. All right. So my question is at this point in your life, what's your spiritual takeaway? What would you like to say to the world?
My life right now, I'll say it, I don't know if I can be super profound. All I can tell you is what the experience is like. Mm-hmm. I was left with breathtaking emotional problems after being taken. My whole life, I was somebody that had a very low self-esteem, and I had very, very breathtaking emotional problems. So much so that I was a nuisance to people in my life. I got over these things when I got my memories back. I was able to change and integrate the things that I had been suffering from, because then I could put my finger on it and kind of do some of the work. And I say some of the work, not all of the work. So my life changed great. Getting my memories back changed my life greatly. Recently, because I got traction because of the books and because of speaking engagements and memories of technologies, recently I've taken on the project of reverse engineering some of the technology. And I've started a company called Maple Street Learning, where I'm working on the learning system that I remembered when I was on Mars, when I was being trained to be a cargo engineer. So the software, the technique of learning was much quicker than what we do down here. So I'm trying to arrange that. And right now we're working on a preschool curriculum. The idea is to go into a homeschooling curriculum that's going to be a faster method of learning, active decision-based learning software. And so my life has changed completely. When you talk about a spiritual journey, your life is intertwined with that.
Education is 100% a spiritual journey. Absolutely.
My life has completely taken a completely different direction than I ever anticipated. And so it's in a state of flux. Like, I don't want to say it, I'm afraid, but I'm definitely uncomfortable with the way, because I'm not living the same old life that I mastered. After doing 30 years of the same job, you get good at it. You can do it in your sleep. And now I've left that all behind, and I'm starting a complete new chapter in my life. I'm 51 years old. And so it's very uncomfortable where I'm at right now. So my spiritual journey is in a period of growth right now. And so that's where I'm at. And I got here by being completely transparent and honest about things. I say things that most people don't say because it's not smart to do about their personal self, but that's how I got here. And so I'm just going to maintain course by sharing everything that I can. I will begin working on a third book that is not going to be about time and space. It's going to be about my time here on Earth since I got my memories back, and what that experience was like. And it's going to, I don't want to say like a tell-all. I'm not going to drag people through the mud. It's just going to be about what the experience is like, because I think a lot of people don't understand what goes on behind the scenes in this community, in the truther community, in ufology, and I think people should know. And and plus it's great. It's a huge exorcism to publish a book, to get a book out there, even if nobody buys it. It doesn't matter. It's like getting it off your chest and put it. Now all of this pain and trauma that I had, that I was living with, is over here, and so now I'm free of it. And that series, Colony Cavalier, really did set me free from. It took me 6 years to write that book. I would write one paragraph, and I'd fall into depression for weeks afterwards. And I'm not belly aching. I'm not being poor me. I'm just saying.
No, you're stating facts. Yeah.
Reliving what I went through was very painful. And so once it was over and that book was published, so now when people ask me, tell us what happened, I say, no, it's in the book, and I don't have to relive it again. So it was very liberating in that regard. So I'm going to continue to write books, as best I can. The other thing is that working with people, keep an eye on the time for you guys. Working with people, I've developed timeline work. And what I've what I figured out was the short-term memories are a very strong muscle in your mind. Like, you can remember how you got to where if you drove today to get to where you are, you drove somewhere and you drove home. If you try, you can remember most of that right now. Your short-term
Correct.
memory is very strong. But if you drove to school back in 1985, and what was the weather like, you don't remember that. Your long-term memory is very weak because we just don't use it very much. So when you deal with people that were abducted and they had their memories deleted on purpose, and we're trying to recover those memories from long, there are techniques
Further. Yeah.
that I developed that help. So there's a memory course on that. There are exercises. You don't need to get hypnotic regression just yet. There are things you can do before that. Like, I'm not anti-regression. I'm just saying you should use your own
There's
natural
other stuff
memory,
along with it. Yeah.
then do a regression. Regression's like a tattoo. So that being said, the timeline work, it's turned out that I use that as a tool for long-term memory to build on, like a framework, like starting someone's life. They're born here, everything that happened in their life to where they're at now, and figuring it out and drawing off the timeline. And what I found is that everybody's timeline is absolutely amazing. When you start adding everything in there, your first love, your first pet, your first job, your first car, your marriage, your kids, your job, you know what I'm saying, your promotion, your hobbies, all your trip to Hawaii, whatever it is. When you add all these things in here, your long-term memory doesn't think about that stuff. It's long forgotten. So when you organize those into a timeline, and you wait a couple days and go back and look at it, it makes you appreciate your beautiful life you had. And everybody's had plenty of great things if you really sit down and write a timeline full of things. So that's something I'm going to work on. I want to make a book for that, like a little guide, like a little pamphlet kind book that is a guide, because it's something that it's a byproduct of the work I've been doing. And I feel
Yeah.
it's important. I think it's a neat technique for people that if you're depressed or dealing with something, I think it's a neat technique to develop long-term memory and to cope with long-term trauma.
Yeah.
And just, if nothing else, to appreciate your life, your whole life. And so that's what I do. That's what I'm working on now.
I know for myself, something I've done for years is, I keep a calendar of some type, and most of the time I get like a book type calendar, and I've got them for like the past 20, 30 years at least. And so I can go back to a calendar 25 years ago and open it up and just start looking, and all those memories come flooding back. And
Isn't that great?
it is
It's a great feeling.
awesome. Yeah. And you oh, that's right, I was working there and the kids were going through this, and all the memories that come in with remembering that doctor's appointment. I mean, it's just really, really interesting. And I did it because of things that happened in my life that I eventually wanted to write about. I started keeping them, and then it was like instead of a diary, I just kept a calendar. It was easier. And but one thing I did want to ask you is, do you feel at risk now of any type of retaliation, or from outer space, from local government,
So
drug lords, whatever?
I got to say that in the last year, the attacks have ramped up on just my testimony. So yes, in one regard, I thought, wow, what took them so long? I've been talking about this for 7 years now. I've been speaking publicly since 2016, and I'm just now starting to get on the radar of the people that are hateful. So there's that. But no, the book is out already. It's very hard to undo a paperback copy in a few thousand homes. So I feel very accomplished for that, for one. For two, when I first did this, the very first time I sat down for an interview, they said, do you want to make up a alias? Do you want to use your name, or do you want to make up a name? And I thought, I was like, Laser Man, or, I was trying to think up cool names, and I just couldn't do it. I just had a writer's block, and I don't have that in me to go by a alias, talk about myself in the third person. So I went by Tony. And at that point, before that interview hit YouTube, I really had to do some soul searching, and I was afraid. I said, look, this is another key, and I would recommend this to everybody. I made a conscious decision to say, whatever happens to me is going to happen, but I'm not going to be afraid of it. I'm not going to walk the day being scared of every turn of the wheel. I'm not going to live my life. And I realized when I did that, and I actually put focus towards it and said, it's not about being brave. It's about not being afraid. There's a difference.
Right. Big
And so
difference.
when I realized it and I look back on my life in hindsight, I was afraid of everything. I was always afraid of this or that. And I gave up on that. And I had to consciously say, look, I'm not going to be afraid. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to be afraid of it. I'm just going to, this is the logical step. I knew for a fact that I did not want to be on my deathbed and not tell anybody this account of everything, all this information. It's a great deal of
That
information. And
would have
so
been
I
heartbreaking.
knew
Yeah.
that if I was dying and said, I wish I would have said something, it would have drove me crazy. And so that was the reason, that was my real motivator. It was selfish.
Well, I have seen other truthers or similar type people say. I think even Stephen Greer mentioned in one of his talks about he's told people, if you're going to talk about something, talk about it big and loud.
It's the safety net. Exactly.
It's a safety net. Yeah.
Well, because now even if something if I choke on a chicken bone, heaven forbid, if I have just a natural mishap of a death, the conspiracy rumors are going to go, the mill is going to go for years after I pass. So even if nothing happens. So at this point, speaking publicly about it is a bit of a safety net.
Yes.
But I hear you saying as well as it seems to be a underlying common theme through what you're saying that actually answers my original question of what would, in a spiritual sense, what message would you bring to the world? I keep hearing you say, be your authentic self, always, everywhere, all the time, 100%, at all cost, be authentically you, good, bad, or ugly, authentic, authentic, authentic. Yeah.
There's a certain amount of responsibility that people have, that we have in society. We have an unrealistic society that we live in, and it's changing. But there's a certain amount of authenticity that's impossible. But for the most part, being afraid of it and being ashamed of yourself is not the right answer. So we all have our thing. Like I said, the timeline exposes that. That's what I love about it. As I say, most people that are fake are doing so just because they're afraid that their real self won't garner their love or the respect that they want, the
Right.
attention that they really want. So they're trying to fake it, and it's in an innocent way. It may even turn malicious in practice. But I'm saying,
Right.
once you look back on your life and realize that no matter what, if you've lived a decent amount of time, you've experienced a good amount of things. And so when you can concentrate on that, be thankful of that, it's very easy to be your honest self. And and other people try to beat you down, like people with big egos will beat you down. Oh, I've got a private jet, you don't. And if you just become bulletproof to that and understand that, that's great, I'm happy for you, but I also have, a 4-year-old. And so everybody is equal in a cerern amount of emotional
I got a
things.
4-year-old and
Things to
I'm
be
not
proud.
afraid to use it.
That's right. We all have something that's a big accomplishment that eats up our life, that eats up a big amount of our life, that is a great accomplishment. It might not be a 4-year-old, it might be a hobby, it might be anything. But I'm saying everybody has something that they can be proud of. Everyone.
Yeah.
And if you can just
Yeah.
be thankful for what you have, you don't have to worry about the egos that are the weak attack of the ego. And so that, I think, I was living that life. I was living that life of trying to project that before I got my memories back, 2010 to 2014, I was on the treadmill, and I thought that there might be this dollar amount that makes me worth something, makes people love me one day, that makes me worthwhile, worth my dad's pride. I might hit a dollar amount. There might be a score or a number that I hit that makes me worth living. And when I gave all that up, after I got my memories back, I also had the memories of the suffering. And then it made me very appreciative of where I was, because I remembered all the hell that I went through. And so I went, wait a minute, I'm happy how it is. I don't need that number. I don't need any of this. And I let go of it all. And I've been very happy ever since. Happiness is a conscious decision. You have to decide to hate somebody. You have to decide to love somebody. You have to decide to stay with somebody. Marriage isn't thrown upon you. You have to make a conscious decision that I'm, for better or worse, and you have to say, I'm going to be happy. I'm not going to let today I'm not going to just be bitter today. I'm going to be happy today. And when I started to do that, my life turned around, and it's been worth living since then. It's been really good. So
That's awesome. How many times have we tried to get that across to people, Margot? Nobody makes
Cool
you.
for someone
Nobody
else to
makes
say
you
it.
anything. Yeah.
Turns out you were right all along. Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love it. So just to remind people real quick, Project Star Maker is
The
out
latest
there
book. Yep.
on Amazon, and series Colony Cavalier, and I did not mean to do that. Let me hide
Hey, that
There
worked
we
though. That was cool looking though.
It worked really well, Iris. It did good.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, hey, I'll just keep adding squares. I never know what buttons I'm hitting. It's like all kinds of settings back here. And visit TonyRodrigues.com for more information about him and other links and that sort of thing. Next, just to kind of let people know what's coming up on our show next week, we're gonna have it's today the 7th. Today's the 7th. So next week we're going to talk a little bit more about UAPs, ETs, and interstellar etiquette. If that doesn't make sense, we'll explain it to you then. The 21st, we're doing psychic readings. And on the 23rd, Books on Fire, we're going to talk about
Banned books.
Banned books, yes.
Banned book title.
But Tony, thank you so much, because I know I want to honor your time. We could talk all night with you. It's awesome for you to be here, but like you said, we should have ended.
Thank you for being available.
But it's been awesome.
Approachable. Thank you for, like they said, like Gene and Dale Stacy said, thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are moving us forward.
All right.
Believe it or not.
All right, folks. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you for joining the Eyes of Indigo with Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Music is Arcadia by Kevin MacLeod. Find us at facebook.com/Eyes of Indigo, on YouTube under @Iris Carter Enterprises, and on various podcast aggregators. Copyright 2023 by Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Copyright 2023 by Iris Carter.